Welcome and thank you for joining us in this Lunch and Learn presentation, which will be covering the Timecard setup and approval process. The Timecard approval process allows customers to capture actual labor costs on their jobs. Labor costs on jobs are typically the largest cost incurred, and being able to monitor those costs throughout the duration of the job, as in where you are with your actuals versus your budgeted costs, will be beneficial. Timecards can be created three ways: by clocking in and out of the Proven Jobs mobile app, clocking in and out with Proven Jobs utilizing the time clock option, or by the manual creation of timecards. Before we get started, let's review a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be shared in our help library as well as our YouTube channel. All participants have been muted to cut down on any background noise. We also ask that you turn off your video to avoid any visual distractions. Lastly, at the end of the session, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Please enter any questions you may have in the chat box within the Zoom meeting. We will endeavor to answer all questions in the session, but if we run out of time, we will reach out to you directly with an answer. And of course, if you think of a question after the session concludes, please reach out to our support team at support@canamsys.com. On the agenda today, we will be covering the following: role security, company settings, which will cover timecard rules, timecard rate rules and exceptions, and the timecard approval setup. We will review an internal employee card, the timecard screen and the timecard approval process, and lastly, job financials and reporting. In role permissions, company administrators will need to review the following role permissions to allow users to review and or edit timecards as well as approve if required. To get to role permissions, navigate to Settings and Roles. In here will be a list of current roles set up. Select the role you wish to permission by clicking on Edit. Today, we will be reviewing the Project Manager role. The first area in role permissions is in the Jobs and Job Financials. Show Rates. This permission determines whether or not the user with this role should see full job costs for labor once timecards are approved. If selected, the user will be able to see labor costs that will include the rate of pay that the labor costs are calculated from. If not selected, the user will only see total costs on the Financials tab. Our top view with the Show Rates selected will show the labor rate applied to the internal contact record. The bottom view shows where Show Rates has not been selected. Although the user does not have the full visibility of costs, they will be able to see those on the Financials tab, Totals tab. The other two permissions within this area are View and View Own. View will show all financials on all jobs regardless if the user is on the Relationships tab. View Own will show financials only on jobs the user is assigned to on the Relationships tab. The next permission we're going to review are Rates. For customers syncing with QuickBooks Online, rates can be set up on the internal contact record. For those customers syncing with QuickBooks Desktop, the rates set up in the employee record there will sync the applicable rate type and rate of pay to the internal contact record. Any edits to those rates must be done in QuickBooks Desktop, which will sync and update the internal contact record improvement jobs. For customers who are syncing with our desktop accounting, rates are set up in there. Those rates will not be visible on the contact record in the web. Those permissions should only be given to company administrators. For QuickBooks Online, you have the ability to create, delete, edit, and view. The next permission we are going to review is rate types. For customers syncing with QuickBooks Online or standalone databases, rate types such as regular, overtime, or double time must be set up in company settings to select on the internal contact record. The rate type setup in company settings will be shown later in this session. Please note this permission should be reserved for company administrators as the setup is done in company settings. Here we have create, delete, edit, and view. Our next role permission will be Timecards. Company administrators need to determine if the role should be able to create timecards for all employees, just their own time cards, or not. The same decision will need to be made in regards to deleting and editing. In here we have options create, create own, delete, delete own, edit, or edit own. The resync option is for our customers who sync with our desktop accounting. This can be selected if a time card did not sync or the time card is unposted and then approved again. Please note that if the time card is edited and approved again, it will send a new time card and the original time card will need to be deleted. Time card approval allows the user to approve time cards. Time card approval setup. This permission is for company administrators as this is done in company settings, which will be covered later in the session. Time card approve all. This permission, if selected, allows the user to select all time cards for all employees at one time. The transfer option allows customers who are not utilizing the time card approval setup. The transfer process is similar but is not as flexible as the approval process, meaning you cannot pick and choose the time cards you want to approve. Unpost, if changes to a time card that has been fully approved and in a transferred status, users have the ability to unpost a time card to edit. Please note that once edited and saved, the time card will need to go through the approval process again to apply the labor costs to the job and the transfer of time to your accounting software. Also note that this will send a new time card to your accounting software. It will not update the original time card. And lastly, we have view or view own. Should the user be able to see all time cards or only their own time cards? Next, let's take a look at time card exceptions. Time card exceptions are a way to capture the applicable rate calculations outside the regular daily number of hours, such as after hours or break times. This will be covered later in the session when we review company settings and would be for company administrators to set up. In here we have create, delete, edit, and view. Next, let's select relationships and go over the permissions in here that relate to our session. We're going to select employees. Edit Supervisor Approver allows the user to add, edit, or delete named employees on an internal contact. We will review how this looks later in time card approval setup and within an internal contact where this is applied. View allows the user to view all internal employee records. View Own allows the user to only view their own internal employee record. And View Time Card tab allows the user to view the Timecard tab on the internal employee record. Please note, if the role does not have the permissions show rates, the user will not be able to see rates of pay within the Timecard tab. Our last role permission will be in Reports. Selecting Report. We have many time reports. Scrolling through the list, coming down to the selection of our available time reports, select the applicable report for this role. The next areas we will be reviewing are in company settings. We will review the following: the Mobile tab. Inside of this tab, there are 3 settings: Required Timecard Description, Auto Create Timecard Topic, and Auto Create Timecard Note Subject. To get to our company settings, we're going to navigate to Settings, Company Settings. We're going to go into Jobs, and we're going to select the Mobile tab. Our first setting, Required Timecard Description. If selected on clock out when using the mobile app, the user will be required to enter information in the description field. Auto Create Timecard Note Topic. When a topic is selected, on clock out, a log note will be placed on the job automatically with this topic if a description on the clock out is added. Auto Create Timecard Note Subject. When a user clocks out, a log note will be placed on the job with the subject being filled in automatically with what is entered here. The description field must be filled in for this to happen. If a description in the clock out is not added, no note will be added to the Job Notes tab. In the next tab, we will be reviewing the following: Timecard Rules, Timecard Rate Rules, and Timecard Exceptions. Within the Timecard Rules section, let's look at Round Timecards from Time Clock. In the drop-down menu, there are many options to choose from. The most common selection is 15 minutes, which when selected, the clock-in time will be rounded to the nearest 15 minutes. Timecard Period. This is where calculations are made for regular versus overtime based on the period selected. Example, if you pay overtime on a daily basis after a specific number of hours, then select Daily. And finally, First Day in the Week. Select from the drop-down your first day in a payroll week. Timecard Rate Rules can be set up so the system will calculate the rate of pay by the number of hours based on this setup. In our example here, because we've set our timecard period to daily, we've indicated that after 8 hours, overtime will be calculated. Next is Timecard Exceptions. Timecard exceptions are exceptions to the timecard rate rules set out above. Example, lunch breaks. We can have the system automatically clock the user out and then back in at a specified time in the day, the days of the week. And we can also set it to the rate of none, where we don't pay for our staff's lunch breaks. Exceptions can also be set up for call-outs, specifically after hours or on weekends. These exceptions only apply when using the clock in and out in the mobile app. It will not apply if the user clocks in using the time clock option or if a manual time card is created. And lastly in here, display non-approved time cards only. This checkbox will only show time cards that are not approved within the approval screen. It will not show in Timecard approval any time cards that have been fully approved. Default for new employee. In here, you can select the category and selector for employee records when new employee records are created after this is set. The last tab to be reviewed in this area of settings is the Closing Job tab. A new option available, not allow closing job with untransferred time cards. When selected, if a job is attempted to be closed, but there are time cards that are not transferred as yet, an error message will appear advising the user that the job cannot be closed due to non-transferred time cards. Now let's move on to where company administrators can set up rate types to be applied to employee contact records. Navigating to Edit Rate Types. Please be reminded that this is set up only applies to customers who are syncing with QuickBooks Online or are standalone with no accounting software syncing to proven jobs. Customers who are syncing with QuickBooks Desktop, the rates will sync to proven jobs to the internal contact record. And for customers who are syncing with our desktop accounting, the rates will not sync to the internal contact record as they are housed within the record in PSA Desktop. In here, you can see a list of existing rate type setup. To create a new one, simply click Create and enter in the new rate and select Save. The final area to review in the Jobs area in Company Settings is the Timecard Approval Setup. Navigate again to the blue hyperlinks and select Edit Timecard Approval Setup. In here, company administrators can set up the approval levels depending on who is required to review and approve time cards within their organization. In this approval setup, the PM employee type is the first level of approval, and a final level is a named employee. Please note that when adding employee types as an approval level, that employee type must be present on the Relationships tab on Jobs. If the employee type is not added to the Relationships tab on a job, those time cards will not be visible when that level is approving time cards. The first level of approval in our example, when time cards are approved, it will put the time card in a partially approved status. We will review the statuses later in this session. The second and final level in this setup is a named employee. This level of approval allows the named employee to approve time cards as the final approver. The final approval level puts the time cards in a fully approved status, also known as transferred, and will transfer those time cards to your accounting software. Please note this level does not require the employee named in the employee setup to be present on the Relationships tab on Jobs. This level also allows the named employee to approve time cards on behalf of prior approval levels. This will be shown later in the presentation. It is recommended that the number of approval levels be set to no more than 2 levels, as it could impede the timeliness of approval process if time cards must go through many levels to get to the fully approved status. I would like to point out that if you have time card approval levels currently set up and wish to make changes to the levels, there cannot be any time cards in a partially approved status. They must be either in a not transferred or transferred status to make the changes. There are 3 icons available to select when setting up your approval levels. The first icon is our employee type. The second icon is a list of our available employees. And the star icon represents the new option of Employee Supervisor Timecard Approver. We will look at that in a moment. This star icon represents the Employee Supervisor Approver setup. This level can be used alone or as an additional level of approval. We will review this setup shortly on our internal contact. Having this setup will allow those employees who have been added on the contact record in the Employee Supervisor Approver area the ability to approve time cards. This option does not require the employee to be added to the Relationships tab on Jobs. This new option allows flexibility in the approval process to allow more than one named employee to approve time cards. This comes in handy if a named person is the primary approver of time cards, but requires a backup if not available to approve time. If this level is set as the only level approval in time card approval setup, once the time cards are approved, they will be fully approved and will be transferred to your accounting software. Another option available to customers to capture additional information on time cards is to set up custom fields for selection when the user clocks out in the mobile app or if a manual time card is created. This option can be used to allow the user to specify the type of work performed, such as hazardous work, or if the time card represents paid time off or work was performed on a stat holiday. When the time cards are reviewed, the reviewer can adjust the rate of pay on the time card approval screen if needed. We will review this later in our session. Selecting the blue Edit Custom Fields. In the screen, select Time Clock. In here, users have the ability to add up to 4 lines of additional information to be captured on clock out or manual time cards. In our database, we have several with a checkbox and one with the option drop-down, which will allow the user to select the applicable option that relates to the time entry. On the mobile app, in the clock-out screen, you will notice we have our call-out checkbox, our drop-down to select if this type of work is time off, and we also have our biohazard and our PPE checkbox. In our Timecards, Timecard Create, you will also see our options as part of our setup. The next area we will review before we get to the Timecard approval area is an internal contact record, navigating to relationships, to contacts, and find the contact that you wish to edit. Selecting Edit. In here are options you may wish to select on your internal contact record. The default labor category and labor selector. This category and selector will be present when time card is created on clock out, or if a manual time card is created as a default, should the user who is clocking in not choose a different category and selector on clock in. Overhead percent. Adding an overhead percentage to the internal employee record will add the overhead costs when time cards are fully approved. The system will calculate the total number of hours by the rate of pay and then calculate the overhead percent to the approved time card. This will be visible on the Financials tab within Jobs. We will look at this later in our session. The Timecard tab. The Employee Supervisor Approver Setup is the new option recently released to allow more than one named approver of timecards for the internal contact. When using this new option in the timecard approval setup, this level must be present as an approver level. This option can be set as a first or final level, or even a single level of approval depending on your requirements. We will look at this in a bit more detail. Next, we have our rates. In here, the applicable rates for the internal employee can be added. Adding rates here is only available for our QuickBooks Online customers or customers that are standalone. As mentioned, customers connected to QuickBooks Desktop or our PSA desktop will not be able to add or change rates here. To add a rate, simply select the plus sign. From the applicable list, enter in the rate, and then go ahead and hit save. Please note, if rates are not added to the internal contact record or the rate types set up is not the same as what is in Timecard rate rules, when timecards are approved, the actual labor cost will not be calculated as the system is looking for the rate amount and or rate type based on the timecard rate rules to do the calculation. Now let's take a quick look at the Timecard lookup screen and review some of the features. Navigate to Jobs and select Timecards. The plus Create allows users with the role permission to create manual timecards. The Copy option allows users to copy time from an existing timecard to a new timecard for an employee. This is a great time saver if more than one employee is at the same job for the same amount of time. Selecting Copy and selecting our employee that we wish to copy from. Select our date that we wish to copy and to the new employee and select Copy. You will receive a message that the timecard has been created successfully. Timecard Approval. This button takes the user to the timecard approval area. And of course, we have our clear filters. The Start Date Range from and to. Set the date range you wish to review timecards for. And Column Show Hide. This option allows the user to set the columns available to review on timecards. Within the timecard list, users can review the timecards in the period selected. While edits to timecards can be done in the timecard approval process, it is recommended to make edits to timecards here. Reviews such as the job that was selected on clock in, the total hours, descriptions, if any, added on clock out. Also, if custom fields have been set up and they are selected in column Show Hide, the user will see those fields as well. If an edit is required on a timecard and the role has the permission to edit timecards, select Edit. Please note that all fields are editable on a timecard with the exception of the employee. If any changes are made, ensure you select Save. Now that we have reviewed role permissions, company settings, the setup in an internal contact, and the timecard screen, let's review the Timecard approval process. Based on the Timecard approval setup in this database, where the first level of approval is the PM, I am logged in as a PM. We're going to navigate to Jobs, to Timecards, and selecting the Timecard approval button. In here, select the from and to date range you wish to approve Timecards for. Please note that you can only approve Timecards for a 30-day time span. Once the date range is selected, click on Load Timecards. In the Employee drop-down, the PM will be able to see the Timecards for the employees that worked on jobs. In this employee record, if there are Timecards for this employee where they worked on jobs other than their own, they will see those Timecards. However, they will be grayed out as they will not be able to approve those Timecards. In the total hours by rate area, the PM will be able to see the total regular and overtime hours, as well as any additional custom field hours. Remember, the setup in Timecard rate rules is what dictates how this is calculated. For this employee, they worked 8 hours of regular time, 2 hours of overtime, and 1 hour was on call. You will also see the additional time on the jobs that are not the PM's jobs. If changes are required to be made to the total hours on a job, the PM has the ability to make those changes. Example, if the total overtime hours need to be changed, they will need to adjust the start and the end time. The system will automatically update the time. Adjustments to Timecards will update the Timecard back on the Timecard screen. Please note the changes made to Timecards in the approval screen will only be saved to the Timecard once Timecard approval has been completed. Changing the time in here will not update. You will see my change in my time for overtime has highlighted my Timecard in yellow, meaning I need to match my start or my end time to the total number of hours on record. To approve Timecards, users have 2 options to approve if Timecards have been reviewed and any changes have been made. At the end of each Timecard, there is a checkbox where the user can select which Timecard they wish to approve. It is not a requirement to select them all to approve, which is useful if the job costs for labor need to be updated for a specific job. The Approve column has a checkbox which is a Select All option for the employee that is selected in the drop-down. And lastly, select all Timecards for all employees. If permissioned on the role, we'll select all Timecards for all employees in the drop-down. Once the selections are made, the PM can now select Approve Selected. A message will appear prompting the PM indicating you are about to approve the Timecards. Are you sure you want to continue? Selecting Yes. The message will appear the Timecards have been successfully approved. In our Timecard approval setup, the PM is our first level, with our final level being a named employee. I will now show the approval levels for a named employee. We're going to navigate to Jobs and Timecards. In here, the user will be able to review Timecards that have been partially approved, fully approved, or not approved. We can look at our approved time cards. In here, it will tell us who approved our time. If the last level approver needs to make changes to a time card that is partially approved or fully approved, they will need to select the Unpost option. This will move the time card from a partially approved status to allow them to make the changes. In here, they can manage and change. Once changes have been made, select Save. Please note, if this first level does not go through, if a time card is unposted and edited, the time card will need to be reapproved by the prior level approvers. The final approver does have the ability to approve on behalf of the PM, which we will look at in a few minutes. Now let's look at time card approval for our final level approver. Selecting time card approval, we have our from and our to date range, but you will also notice a new field where the final level approver can select to approve levels below this level. To select for a project manager, it will display the time cards that need to be approved by the lower level. The same edits can be made here as in our previous level. And if everything is okay, select all time cards and then approve selected, answering yes to the question. This final level approver will now have to load the time cards again to complete and fully approve time cards. The load time cards is selected, and again, the user has the ability to review all of the employees that have clocked in our designated period. If everything is good to go, we select all time cards for all employees and then approve selected and answering yes to our question. Back on the time card screen, you will now see that our time cards just approved are now in a status of transferred. Now that the time cards have been approved, let's take a look at how this information appears on the Financials tab on a job. Selecting the Financials tab, the Totals tab will show in the labor bucket the total actual labor costs to date. And if there is a budget set up in the work orders, it'll display the estimated labor costs. Users will be able to see how they're doing as far as the estimated labor costs versus actuals. Next, we want to select our Costs tabs. In here, with the visibility of Show Rates, our user is able to view time cards that have been approved. They will see the cost per hour, the quantity, and if an overhead percentage has been applied to the internal contact record, we will see that number as well, and then our total actual labor cost. Our last area that we're going to review are reports. There are many time reports users can run to review time prior to the approval process and after. Navigating to the Reports menu option, select List All, and in the title field, let's just enter in time. Here we'll display a number of our reports that we have available for you. Let's take a look at our timesheet report by clicking on View. The timesheet report is a great report to review prior to going through the approval process. This report will allow the user to select their from date range and the to date range. You'll be able to choose active or inactive or all employees, employee types. You can specify as an internal employee. You can even drill down into a job or select a team. Once selections are made, select Submit. This report will display the punches in and out, the job name and number, as well as the total hours. The report will show each employee per page that have timestamps in the from and to date range. Another report that may be useful is the Timecard Approval New Report. Again, users have the ability to make selections prior to submitting. In here, the user will see the time cards that are approved, partially approved, or not approved. For those time cards that are approved, the user will be able to see the breakdown of the total hours by rate. For time cards that are approved, the user will also be able to see who did the approval and whether it is fully approved or partially approved. And now we will open up the floor to any questions. Please enter your questions in the chat box in the Zoom meeting.